Hello, everyone. This is Daniel from Teradata. As you know, if you have watched our previous live streams, I'm a developer advocate at Teradata. I'm based in Europe. In the controls today, my colleague Birham, which you might know from other live streams as well. And we have a very nice sessions for you today. The session today is a little bit different to what we usually present. We are going to have a fireside chat with one of our subject matter experts in Teradata. And of course, this is going to be about a very interesting topic. We are going to talk about unlocking faster insights from unstructured and structured data with Teradata Enterprise Vector Store. Our guest today is Anu Jibodu, which is one of our technical solution architects in the field, working hand in hand with our customers. Thank you very much to join us today, Anu. And yeah, everyone has been hearing a lot about vectors. We know that to work with LLMs, you have to deal with the context window. And one of the best ways to deal with that limitation in LLMs is to implement retrieval augmented generation pipelines. So basically, you pass kind of like a cheat sheet to the LLM, where you pass to the LLM where is likely the data that the LLM should use to build a response for you. And the way that the retrieval part of these systems is built is vectors. Vectors are structures that allow us to perform semantic searches across text, just to know what text is similar to what other text that we have collected. To store those vectors, basically the concept of vector databases has become very popular. And a lot of people is not aware that actually you can do vector searches and vector indexes in Teradata. And of course, Anu is a lot more experienced in implementing this in production. And I would like to pass the ball to Anu to introduce herself very briefly, and then we are going to start with the topic specifically. Anu, up to you.
Hi, Daniel. Thanks for having me. My name is Anu. I'm a customer solution architect. I work in new logos, so I work with our prospect accounts, and I'm all things solution design. And Enterprise Vector Store kind of fits squarely into that because this is a need that we're seeing with a lot of our prospects. So excited to be here and have this conversation with you.
Amazing. And to start taking advantage of your expertise, can you tell us what is Teradata Enterprise Vector Store in simple terms?
Sure. I'll try to make this as simple as possible. So, Enterprise Vector Store refers to the in database capabilities that let you do analytics. A lot of people think of like generative AI on your unstructured data, right? So, you're able to take things like PDFs, log data, images, turn those into numerical representations, which are what we call vectors via the process of vector embedding, and then you're able to do all sorts of like cool analytics on those vector embeddings. So with the vector store, you're able to manage the entire life cycle of your vectors. You're able to store them, manage them, do optimized search and retrieval on them at really, really massive data volume scale. Um, and you're also able to like integrate with all the suite of partner integrations, like namely like NVIDIA. We have partner integrations with most of the like foundational models. And then one key component that I want to mention as well about the vector store is that it's integrated into your a broader data ecosystem. So this is something that we'll talk a lot about during this chat, but you're able to combine your more traditional structured analytics with your unstructured data analytics, not only within the same database, but even within like the same analytic workflow. So I hope that was simple, but we can also dive into it in more.
Very, very, very clear. And there, you got my brain spinning there with a lot of different questions and interesting use cases that we can discuss. And one question that comes to my mind is, what are the current limitations that traditional vector databases have for enterprises? And what trends and challenge have you seen emerging in the market where this Teradata Enterprise Vector Store actually makes a great fit for what our customers are looking for.
Yeah, for sure. So in terms of challenges, I think one of the core challenges is this integration of unstructured data with structured data. So in the world of enterprise analytics, this idea of using generative AI, leveraging unstructured data, is still very nascent. So companies are still very much just trying to figure out how to leverage these technologies, how to get value from unstructured data. And one of the issues is data integration, which is actually very funny because this is definitely one of the issues in the world of just traditional data analytics. But this idea of having like data silos, right? You want to be able to integrate your unstructured data with your structured data, to be able to do things not just RAG, but even past RAG, like being able to combine your data sets and combine modalities of data to do 360-degree customer analytics, right? So being able to like truly join your data from unstructured sources as well as structured sources is where a lot of enterprises want to be, and are running into challenges with that. Another limitation I absolutely have to mention is scalability, right? Vectors provide an unprecedented data volume. You're looking at like billions of vectors, sometimes thousands of embedding dimensions. So is your platform able to scale to that volume? Is it able to support sub-second, response times at this volume? You have the optimization built into your search and retrieval in order to do these really large scale, and really complex, analytic workflows. You have the flexibility of architecture, to do CPU based, modeling or GPU based modeling. How is your system responding to this really advanced complexity, specifically at scale, right? And not only at scale, but at really high degrees of concurrency with different people hitting your AI applications at the same time. So this is kind of a limitation that we see as, bottlenecking in terms of performance. And then another trend that I see personally, based on some of the industries that I support, is that this conversation around vector databases and generative AI right now is primarily a cloud-based conversation, but
Mhm.
there's absolutely need, specifically in like highly regulated industries, to do AI on premises. And when doing AI on premises, enterprises don't want to sacrifice rich functionality and optimization. They don't want to sacrifice integration with your structured data or massive scalability to be able to do that on prem. So these are just some of the limitations I'll mention. There's so many conversations. If you're, kind of listening to the news, there's so many conversations around, all sorts of like challenges, and there's just such like a vast landscape of enterprises trying to figure these things out. And again, I think this is where Enterprise Vector Store is really uniquely positioned to solve for a lot of the, kind of challenges that enterprises are running into.
I'm very curious here about use cases that you have seen, like interesting use cases where you have this confluence of traditional analytics and vector store analytics. Because, yeah, it is, even in my introduction, I mentioned a lot about RAG, but there is a myriad of possibilities that you can have when you drop these capabilities of the vector search and vector indexing with existing workflows that you have for more traditional ML. And I'm curious if you have some use cases there that you would like to highlight that are possible due to this confluence of technologies.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love use cases. I love seeing like the breadth and creativity of use cases and applications that are out there. I will speak to some of the ones that I'm really seeing a lot of. And one thing I want to mention is that there really is such a breadth of use cases when it comes to, these Gen AI workflows and leveraging the vector store, all the way from what I would consider maybe like more simple or straightforward applications to really sophisticated agentic AI workflows.
Mhm.
So, kind of on like the simpler side, one thing that I will, mention that I see a lot, but is also like a really big need, is just the idea of doing like document synthesis and search, right? So you have a million PDF documents, or rather, more accurately, you have millions upon millions of PDF documentation. Maybe that's doctor's notes, maybe that's like call center transcripts, and you want to identify key trends within those documents. Or maybe you want to be able to search that corpus of document data for a specific answer, right? So the actual application varies a lot, but the idea that we're seeing a lot is I have a ton of documentation, I have a ton of unstructured data. I want to get some signal or some insight from that. And with the vector store, you're able to do that. So, from NDB vector embeddings to actually creating, you can create a vector store kind of based off of these PDF data chunks, and do semantic search on top of that with our like in database functionality. But you have a lot of capabilities to drive these sorts of use cases. And I will say these use cases are also oftentimes a precursor for the more sophisticated agentic AI workflows that we see, wherein, okay, now you've gotten the signal from your corpus of data. How do you feed that into, another kind of workflow at that point? So on the more complex side,
Mm-hmm.
something that I've kind of been really interested in and seeing a little bit more of is these kind of multi-step AI workflows. So instead of just retrieving or summarizing documents, you can kind of orchestrate these step-by-step AI processes to do things like in healthcare, like patient outcomes. So I'll give an example. Like in a clinical setting, you might be wanting to determine if a patient is at risk of developing a particular comorbidity, right? So based on a complete picture of your patient. So you have your patient's structured demographic data, you have their health records. Now you're combining this with your PDF doctor notes, you're combining this with your pharmacy scripts, perhaps like transcripts of conversations that the patient has had. You're able to like integrate all of that data with real-time signals coming from the patient to provide like a very comprehensive patient care, or like disease prevention program, right? So breadth of application is wide. We're seeing some really, really cool things being executed. And then because of the flexibility of kind of like the vector store architecture, the types of use cases we're seeing are getting even like cooler and more complex.
That's very interesting. Yeah, it's very interesting what you were mentioning. And something that came to my mind, and I don't know if you have seen something in that direction, but it's related to something that you mentioned at the beginning, that you can do vector generation on logs. And I was thinking, okay, you can have logs of transactions, for example, in the financial industry, and then you can have that log of transactions generate vectors and build something for maybe fraud detection based on vectors. Of course, you might combine another ML techniques, but that could be an input to give you a little bit another signal of confidence or another feature there. And like that, I'm imagining that there are a lot of interesting things that are happening. Do you have some industry specifics besides healthcare that you would like to highlight?
Yeah, I think in financial services, that's very appropriate, is building incredibly like robust financial risk models. Historically, we've relied on like a lot of like machine learning for that and traditional analytics to build these, massive risk models that are doing, whether that's credit risk or whatever, risk signal you're looking for. But now being able to augment that with unstructured data, whether again that's like something coming in from a call center. Perhaps somebody's having a conversation with a customer service representative and you're flagging kind of like anomalous behavior there. Being able to have this very comprehensive um, plane of data and being able to like pull signals from that is something that we're seeing in financial services. So as to augment, um, risk modeling, and then across all industries. I talked about patient analysis in healthcare, but all industries are supporting customers, right? So being able to create this comprehensive picture of your customer, being able to augment what we call like customer 360, or having a comprehensive scope of like who your customer is, what are they touching, what are they interacting, what are the customer touch points throughout their analytic journey, whether that is, structured data or unstructured data, and being able to use that to determine, customer signals, propensity to buy, and being able to action on that with next best action. These are some of the like more complex agentic AI workflows that we're seeing across a broad range of industries.
That is super interesting. And yeah, all of those cases that you were mentioning have this element that you were highlighting of traditional ML and vector-based ML. And I'm curious how does Teradata Enterprise Vector Store integrates those two aspects with existing data ecosystems and probably existing AI and ML pipelines?
Yes. Yeah. So one thing you'll hear me talk about a lot here is the fact that the vector store is not like a separate thing off of, in like a standalone land, right? It's not running on any like separate vector specific hardware. It's actually running in your Teradata platform. So it's fully integrated into your existing data ecosystem. So you're able to run your vector searches right alongside your more traditional analytic workflows. You're able to combine your unstructured data and your structured data to do things within this, what we call like an integrated data plane. And then because it's also running in database, that means that everything about Teradata's architecture, everything that you know and love in terms of like governance, workload management, in terms of like extensibility and ability your data sources is still in play, right? So in terms of the open architecture, you're still able to connect to your external data sources, whether that's open table formats or object storage, um, and pull those data points into your database, or run analytics against those data points. And then specific to your point on like AI ML pipelines, you still have your integration with your ecosystem tools of choice for data ingest, for model development, for feature engineering. You still have your in database library of really, really powerful AI and ML lifecycle functions. You have like those core platform capabilities that you kind of know and love. And the vector store is now integrated into that. So that's just one thing I really want to emphasize is that it's just fully integrated into your ecosystem. It's not kind of like a standalone point solution, which is something that we see sometimes in the vector database world. It's already there. It works seamlessly with your existing data asset plan.
I am curious. You mentioned that, yeah, it's been part of the Teradata ecosystem is very, 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 very good because that kind of like takes a lot of the overhead of implementing it out of your shoulders because you have already your Teradata ecosystem there, your Teradata instances, and everything running. Besides that, do you have any other best practices that you have observed for deploying vector search in production environments?
Yes. So I'm not a data scientist or an AI engineer, so I won't get into the technical details of like re-indexing or
Mm,
managing embedding drift. It's just not my domain. But one thing that I've observed is that a lot of the best practices when it comes to unstructured data analytics actually reflect the same best practices that you would have when it comes to like traditional data analytics and data science. So the type of data you're working with has now changed, right? But the principles of data analytics have absolutely not, right? So it's still really important to know your data, to understand your data, and to understand your use case. The first thing I'll say is you want to make sure you're matching the right tool to the right use case.
mm,
So, for example, like you don't necessarily need a GPS to find your fridge. And in the way that you don't need a GPS to find your fridge, you probably don't need like a full table scan vector search to
mm.
which is going to be like more computationally expensive and take longer to execute when an approximate nearest neighbor search is going to work just as well and give you 99.9% accuracy, right? So knowing the workload, knowing the requirements of your workload, and being able to tailor that to kind of like the search and retrieval functions that you're using is going to be very important. And then also that kind of goes into cost, right? Um, this just in the world of unstructured data, because of the data volume, because of the compute needs, it can get very expensive very quickly. So again, you want to make sure that you're optimizing for like the algorithms you're choosing to use, the indexing strategies you're choosing to use, and then also monitoring like your performance, monitoring your resource utilization, and making sure that you have that governance around your costs and you have that control in place. Another thing I will mention in terms of best practices is absolutely data governance. So the ability to like explain your data, specifically in the world of unstructured data, it
Mhm.
it becomes a black box very quickly, right? When LLMs are doing data processing, we don't
Yes.
necessarily know what's going on behind the scenes. So it's really important that we're able to understand our data, track our data, trace how data is being generated, having metadata in place, having auditable logs to make sure that we just have governance around our data and how it's being used in our workflows. Things like integrating again with more traditional types of analytics like hybrid search. So using your semantic search, but also using keyword based search for more observability, for more like transparency in your results. All of these things are kind of pieces that you want to incorporate to make sure that you have like a really good understanding of the data you have and have like a good data governance posture. And then the last thing I'll say, because I have to mention it in answer to every question, is you want to integrate with your existing data plane, right? There's a lot of value in unstructured data alone, absolutely, but like the umpteenth degree of value that we can get from our unstructured data is also by integrating it with our structured data, right? So again, leverage your existing data, combine your analytics so that you're doing analytics against your unstructured data and your structured data. Leverage your existing tools in your database. We have a library of so many powerful AI and ML functions. You want to leverage what you have. We have again functions that span all the way from like feature engineering to model development, to even like helping to productionize workflows. Leverage your traditional analytics right alongside your unstructured data analytics to create like the best overall outcomes.
Amazing. There were a lot of nuggets there, like all about the data governance and the observability part, which is fundamental for everything, and the metadata part. And yeah, finally, if our customers or anyone that is watching this live stream wants to know a little bit more about Enterprise Vector Store, where should they go?
Yes. So there is an enterprise vector store page on the Teradata website. So that is a great place to start. You can poke around and learn more about the vector store website. We have documentation around some of the vector store capabilities. So we didn't have a ton of time today to go into depth, but if you're interested in really nerding out in terms of like the actual functionalities and capabilities, we have a ton of documentation that's publicly available for you to peruse. And then you can also connect with me and my team. So I'm here to kind of have those conversations if you're trying to figure out how your enterprise, how your organization can kind of start to integrate unstructured data in analytics and how you might be able to leverage a vector store. I'm a great resource to reach out to as well.
That's amazing. And yeah, it's a little bit of self promotion, but also Bidam record a video that you can find in YouTube about the Enterprise Vector Store a while ago. And from our team, and I also wrote a blog And yeah, there we have a lot of documentation on that technology, and yeah, it's amazing. And I would like to give some time for Q&A. I don't know if we have any questions from the public side that we have seen. I will check our socials also, because a lot of times the questions come and from there. And yeah, if anyone has a question, this is a good time for you to ask. Take advantage that Anu is here with us. She can answer your questions in real time. It's a very nice opportunity for everyone to take advantage of. And let's see. Okay, we have something here. What will be the main advantage of choosing Teradata besides a traditional vector database that is already in the market?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And to answer it, I think it helps to understand like the types of offerings that we see in the market. So on one hand, we have these kind of like single purpose vector databases, right? So they're very, very good at doing vector search, at handling, massive scale vector analytics, and they run, primarily in memory. And they're a really good point solution, but they don't integrate necessarily with your existing data ecosystem, right? So that's kind of one camp of vector databases that we see. The other I would call like multi-purpose solutions, which do offer like vector analytics within a larger ecosystem or within a larger kind of platform. But oftentimes, like the ability to scale, like we talked about, is not there. The data governance, like the robustness of data governance, is not there. Or, performance, having really, really low latency in response to these kind of like workflows is not there, right? So I really uniquely positioned because we kind of solve for a lot of things at once. We also have a really long history in terms of doing this thing. So I it might be cheesy to say, but I like to say that we've actually been architected for AI for 40 plus years, right? Before it was ever a thing, because of our massively parallel processing engine, because of just like the intricacy of our software and the optimization within the software, of our like query optimization, software optimization. So we have really, really strong bones and a really mature, sophisticated software that has proven out scalability, the ability to handle massive, massive workloads, handle really high concurrency of these workloads. And we've been doing that for decades, right? So we have just the foundation to handle these types of workloads, while also bringing all those things that I mentioned earlier, like workload management, data governance, um, all within the same platform. And you're integrating with your existing data ecosystem. And you have this really robust library of analytic functions, of generative AI functions, right? So it's kind of all the best of the things in one. And I think that's what really makes it a differentiated offering in the market.
Thank you very much. And I think we don't have more questions. And yeah, I thank you very much. And I think I learned a lot. I can say that, yeah, the enterprise vector store is great and is not only for RAG. I think that's a very good take home point. And it's because you can mix all the analytics that you get from there, and you can put it into the mix of your traditional ML processes that you have already in your organization. And to do that, you really need a platform where those two live together, that you don't have a point solution there to solve for one and point solution to solve for another one. And then you have to kind of like build bridges. But if you do it in Teradata Enterprise Vector Store, basically everything is there. And I also learned a lot about what are good things to keep in mind for production. And yeah, the observability and metadata part, that's key for any ML system. So yeah, very, very, very nice take homes. I would recommend people to go to check the webpage of Teradata Enterprise Vector Store. In teradata.com or in Teradata Medium, you can find the articles that we have written and the YouTube video that Biram has uh, put all in the past. And also, I want to remind everyone that we can check this publication that we have for the ClearScape analytics experience demos and a lot of other demos that we built in our Medium publication. And you can check that out, looking for it in your browser. For the page of their Data Enterprise Vector Store, you can scan the QR code in your screen right now. And you can also go to visit teradata.com/experience to create your account in ClearScape Analytics Experience, your best way to experience their data. Also, we are going to have some QR code there for you in the screen that you can scan and will take you there. For upcoming activities that we have in our backlog here at Teradata, we are going to have soon another live stream where we have another expert. This time is going to be Mr. Martin Hillebrand from our data science team that is going to be sharing about ML pipelines in detail with us. And the next day, also, there is some uh, uh, live stream that we are going to be holding regarding MCP usage and how the Teradata MCP server works. That's something very cutting edge, and that's going to be super interesting. Having said that, I want to thank Anu again for joining us. It has been a very interesting conversation. I always enjoy talking to you in our conference where we always can bump into each other, talking to customers and talking to the community. And you are a great asset for our community. I also want to thank Bidham for being there in the controls, and Yashira, which is checking out our socials there, our intern. Thank you very much for everyone and your attention to this live stream. And feel free to leave any questions in our social. The videos are going to remain there, so you can still ask questions, and we are going to be interacting with you over there. Having said that, thank you very much, guys. We call it done for this one.